A trailer has finally dropped for Season 2 of live-action One Piece, now known as One Piece Into the Grand Line. And there's a lot of really cool stuff in here, so we're going to talk about the good, the not so good, and the buried Easter eggs that you may have missed. So first things first, this is a teaser trailer. It's labeled as a first look on YouTube, but more or less the same thing. So they have been quite conservative with what they've chosen to show. However, as One Piece live action does quite well, this teaser has been made with existing fans of the anime and manga in mind, and to the knowing eye of you and I, it shows us quite a fair bit. So let's now go through this trailer in excruciating detail. Our first shot is a lovely landscape of the Going Merry approaching what looks to be Reverse Mountain. You can even see the water running upwards in the narrow path around here, which frankly looks horrifying. In the anime and the manga, the path did not look anywhere near that vertically angled. And because this is Reverse Mountain, this is also our first shot of the Red Line, which extends above the clouds and houses the Holy Land of Marijois. Although that happens to be on the exact opposite side of the globe at this point. The red line doesn't look particularly red in this shot, but we do see it more close up later, and I think the color does look quite nice. Then we have a quick glimpse of central Logtown, which will be very familiar if you've been keeping up with live action updates, as this is one of the very first things that we were shown for season 2. And in the background, you can see a building that's either owned by or named after the Manmaya family, which has become a shockingly relevant name after Gunko being retconned into that family, but they're one of the world government's 20 founding families. In the background, you can also see the Logtown Opera House, which will be playing Hero of the Marines the musical, which is a heavily biased retelling of the God Valley incident with Garp as its lead character. And you can also see a bunch of banners celebrating a Victory Day, which marks the 22nd anniversary of Roger's execution. And if you zoom in super close, you can even see that they've got printed images of Roger on the execution platform. I think this is a cool idea. Victory Day, it's not something that exists in actual One Piece, but not only does it make sense that they would celebrate Roger's execution for most of the world, a pretty good day, but it also adds a nice footnote of fate for when Luffy shows up to Logtown on this anniversary. So it makes that connection of fate that much stronger. To think that the next Pirate King is going to officially begin his journey on the anniversary of when the last Pirate King's journey ended. We then cut to a landscape of what appears to be Usopp running, and I would imagine that this is probably Little Garden, because that is an arc where he briefly ends up alone and has to come up with a plan to save the day. If it is Little Garden, it's slightly disappointing that it doesn't look more, prehistoric. But then again, finding a Mesozoic era climate to shoot in, probably not easy. And in the end, my preference is that, even if it doesn't quite look right, they should do as much outdoor shooting as possible. Because One Piece is a very outdoor adventure, and one of my criticisms of season 1 was that it really felt like they were trying to keep the greatest adventure ever told too confined and as indoors as possible for logistical production reasons. But next up, we see Zoro and Sanji making their way through a much more jungle-esque part of Little Garden. And I have to admit, I had to double take a bit in realizing that this was Zoro, because the bucket hat really threw me off. It's very Urahara, and almost like we were watching a trailer for live-action Bleach for a second. And look, it takes a special kind of man to pull off a bucket hat, and I don't think that Zoro is that kind of man. To be fair, this is one of Oda's original designs. It's based on Zoro's outfit in the color spread of chapter 128. And generally, I do like when the live action adopts the color spread outfits. For example, one of Usopp's outfits in this trailer is particularly good, but I personally would not have picked this one for Zoro. There's a reason why Oda had this design stuffed into the background, and I hope that he gets rid of the bucket hat pretty quickly. But after this, we have a landscape of Whiskey Peak, which I think looks amazing. Don't really know what more I could ask for here, and I like that they're staying faithful to the wacky geography of this world. But then we see inside the town of Whiskey Peak itself, and it's honestly a bit more disappointing, because to me, it looks like an amusement park. I don't quite know how to verbalize this, but there's just something about it that feels distinctly fake. Not necessarily fake as in it's a stylistic choice to feel that way. However, keep an eye on all of these extras. They're all much more important than most, because these are the 100 bounty hunters that later face off against Zoro. And keep an eye especially on this one here, because this iconic hair means that this guy is probably Igaram. We then move back to Logtown at night with a funky carnival for what I'm assuming is Victory Day. And then we have a very cool shot of Luffy looking up at Roger's execution platform, which is making it clear that the main action of Logtown is going to take place at night, which I like for two reasons. One, there's the wanky thematics where you could say that the journey of the sun god has to start at night because how else is he going to bring the dawn? But also the Shroud of Night makes it easier to buy everything else they're trying to do here. Having just spoke about that Whiskey Peak town shot, I would bet ever so many units of currency that this location looks infinitely better at night because you cannot hide anything under sunlight. It gets everywhere. And if something looks a little too fake, that sunlight, it's going to expose you. Whereas in the darkness, constructing that illusion is much more viable. And later on, there's also a shot of Luffy performing a Gatling gun in Logtown, which I imagine is him facing off against Smoker. And I have to say, this looks pretty damn good. Definitely better than any of the stretching they did in season 1 for sure. There's something about this Gatling gun that feels nice, chaotic, and elastic. It's such a huge improvement. And because he's doing it at night, the CGI isn't under as much scrutiny as it would be if this shot took place during the day. But that is why we have the sponsor of today's video, Fume. Fume is one of these funky flavor fidget sticks. It is a no smoke, no vapor, no nicotine, no batteries, no significant cost to your monies, and a non-toxic, brilliant burst of natural flavored air for your oral enjoyment, as well as to assist you in the battle of breaking bad habits. Fume provides you with a powerful and much needed ally by giving you something else to reach for instead. Something much more better in every way. Even if you're not using it for that peak flavored air experience, you can just fidget with it into infinity, which is exactly what I do on a daily basis. There is always a one of these on my desk, whether it's at home or at the office, because I cannot sit still. And over 500,000 people have already made the switch to Fume as part of their habit-changing journey. So if you are ready to try it for yourself, mate, now is the time. And for a limited now is the time. If you order the journey pack using my code GroundlineReview, then you will get a free Fume topper, an awesome accessory to level up your experience. So just click the link, tryfume.com/GroundlineReview, or scan the QR code on screen to get yours today. And as always, thank you so much again to Fume, because it's their sponsorship that allows us to bring you the best fictional pirate content possible as often as possible. So definitely try them out, but for now it's back to you, me. Next up, we see Nami and Usopp, which definitely takes place after Logtown because Usopp, he has his goggles. And this may be the beginning of Little Garden when it was just the two of them left on the Going Merry. In fact, it has to be because Nami is wearing the same outfit as in the next shot, which is definitely Little Garden. And what we have is our first look at Giants with Brogy stepping into frame, and I'm honestly not too sure about this. Again, I find it quite difficult to verbalize, but there's something just weird and uncanny about it for me. I don't really know what it is. Maybe it's something to do with the composite angles that aren't really lining up nicely to create the effect we're looking for. And I've also seen some people ask whether or not One Piece live action has gone and made the Giants smaller. And admittedly, Brogy does look quite small in this shot, but I think that might just be the way that it's framed. Because having the Going Merry continue past the end point of the top of the frame does give you the illusion that the ship itself is taller than Brogy, and also the illusion that Merry is wider than Brogy, whereas the manga captures this scale quite well in Brogy's introduction by choosing to have Brogy dwarf the Going Merry. All of what I just said there, that's complete nitpickiness though, because this is just one shot, and I'm sure they'll also have another shot in the show where Brogy does look massive compared to the Going Merry, but also this is the one shot that they chose to showcase, meaning that there's some confidence in it, which gives me less confidence in it. And I also hope that Brogy's smile isn't too covered up by his thick bushy beard. With Brogy, for me, his trademark feature is his big wide smile, and whilst no actor could possibly smile that wide in reality, I hope we don't end up obscuring that part of him too much. But next up is what I think is the most interesting shot of the entire trailer, as we see one Miss All Sunday bursting through some doors using her devil fruit abilities. We don't see any limbs, but we do see the trademark petals scattering everywhere and looking quite lovely. And this was surprising to see for a few reasons. One, because Robin doesn't have a huge role in pre-Alabasta events, which we aren't covering this season. That's in season 3. And the second is that the role that Robin does have isn't wherever this is. It looks like Robin is invading a marine base because the statues on either side of the door are the manga designs for Fleet Admiral Sengoku and former Fleet Admiral Kong. If and when they actually appear in the live action, they're probably not going to look anything like this, but I do think these statues are pretty cool. And what this indicates to me is that Robin may have an original B plot in season 2, and we may even see her earlier in Whiskey Peak, because the only island I can think of that this season is covering with its own marine base is Logtown. So we could either see her in episode 1 right from the get-go, or Robin could just be off doing her own thing on some other obscure island to build the threat of Baroque works in the background. We also have a close-up of Robin, and she looks fantastic, way better than all of the fan edits of her actress in assorted cowboy hats. And I am cautiously excited to see how Robin is going to be used for season 2, because she already has a more prominent role than she did in the anime or the manga, and just hope that that doesn't take away from the main story like the B-plot in season 1 did. To the best of my knowledge, the only time that we've seen Robin in a local marine base was the G8 filler arc, so whatever's happening here might even leave room for some sneaky G8 references. Like say she approaches someone and he just happens to be named Commander Shepard or even Condoriano. But then we have Zoro engaging in one sword style holding Yubashiri, so I'm assuming that this is during the bounty hunter fight on Whiskey Peak where Zoro is testing both of the new blades he got at Logtown, after which point we see Smoker getting off his billower bike, and this is our first full look at Captain Smoker. I think he looks pretty damn solid, and I love that he is actually smoking 2 cigars at once. This is fantastic, because there was a chance that this was always going to be one of the weird character quirks that gets cut or reduced for an assortment of reasons like Usopp's long nose, or the fact that season 1 Zoro rarely ever has a sword in his mouth. What I really want to see are the Logia smoke effects though, which I imagine that they will even briefly put into the full trailer whenever that comes out. Then we have Luffy jumping through Little Garden, which I believe is an indoor set because he has some wire work happening, and also because the environment has such a stark contrast to the shots that were done outdoors. My guess would be that this is when Luffy goes off to chase Mr. 3 on his own and finds all of his wax clones. And with our next shot of Sanji, we have a brief glimpse of Mr. 3's wax house on Little Garden, which is it's looking pretty alright. It's wax. What more can you do with it? And Sanji himself doesn't have a whole lot to do on Little Garden, so what we're being shown here is pretty much his main moment, which is followed by a close-up of a very sneaky Nami, which I believe is during Whiskey Peak because she's wearing the same outfit we saw her in before. And this is interesting. So fun thing about Whiskey Peak. Originally, what Baroque Works tried to do is intoxicate all of the Straw Hats with their own unique vices. Luffy with food, Sanji with women, and Nami and Zoro get targeted with alcohol. However, what Baroque Works did not anticipate is that both Nami and Zoro have a near infinite tolerance for alcohol, and that is what leads to their unraveling. The reason why I say all of the that is because all of the that could be changing, as this shot shows Nami during the day discovering or overhearing something potentially disturbing about Whiskey Peak and its residents, which will possibly lead to a non-binge drinking related plan. Remembering that live action One Piece is considered to be children's programming, it won 2 Children's and Families Emmy Awards, and Matt Owens and Stephen Maeda won a Writers Guild Award in the Children's Episodic category. And there were a lot of very non-children friendly things that happened in season 1, but after having its place in media defined as children and family, I could see them not wanting to make stuff like binge drinking seem cool and all that. But next up we see Usopp, and this is the outfit I was talking about before. It's taken from this color spread, and I really like the Usopp lavender combination, so very good choice there. And this actual scene takes place at the fairground in Logtown, which we saw the establishing shot for before. And more big news, as we now have our first look at Vivi. I believe this is after the Going Merry gets swallowed by Laboon, which is why it's also dark, because we're in a whale stomach, and Vivi is attacking with her peacock slashes. Although it's really Miss Wednesday that we're seeing here, because she has this very cool and sinister look on her face. So I'm looking forward to seeing the softer and more empathetic Vivi, but I don't know if we'll get that in any trailer, just because it's a pretty massive spoiler for the season. And after this point, we cut to a series of quick action scenes, and everything happening here looks to be a huge step up from the action in season 1. Part of that may be because for season 2, Makenyu brought in his own stunt team, because according to Stephen Maeda, he was actually too much for the season 1 stunt team to handle, which really held back what he was able to do and therefore what they were were able to shoot. I also particularly like this shot of Nami leaping into the air. I think it's very well choreographed. But also, just look who it is that Nami's attacking. Nami versus Alvida, I will take it. I do imagine that Nami's staff is just gonna slip right off, but this sounds like a fun alternate universe interaction. Usopp also has some action here, but he gets a significantly lamer showcase, just shooting one of Buggy's crew members who looks like a cowboy. And he's so uninteresting that I could not help but gaze upwards to discover three chrome par 64s on a piece of truss. I have a long history with these lights, mostly because they're the cheapest, lightest, brightest, and easiest things you can get your hands on. So whenever I was doing outdoor event work, we were flooding it with par cans. And to conclude the trailer, we see the Going Merry coming down from Reverse Mountain straight into the mouth of Laboon. So it looks like we're streamlining that whole sequence of events, and instead of doing something like Luffy punching Laboon in the eye, we're just heading straight in. I do think that Laboon looks quite small in this shot, but for now I'm going to give it the same grace I did with Brogy. It's just one shot. Who knows? But we should also discuss what isn't in the trailer, and firstly, that is anything from Drum Island, which is the arc where season 2 is going to end. So I can understand not putting anything from Drum in there, but I was hoping to see a bit more of Chopper, who we did get a brief look at during the Tudum event, where I think he looks great, but I'm gonna need a bit more to really sell me on the voice.
Oh, I'm supposed to tell you about One Piece Season 2.
We also didn't get to see Crocodile, who I believe is appearing somewhere in season 2, but very unlikely to be a major role at all. And we also didn't see the rest of Baroque Works minus Miss Wednesday, and I guess that one shot of Igaram, though I imagine that we'll see almost all of them in the full trailer, and that this teaser was just something to mostly reacquaint us with the characters we already know, with the promise of new adventures. This trailer also did something rather interesting for a teaser, in that it said that season 3 production starts soon. I mean, what it actually says is set sail soon, or whatever the language was, but what they mean is it starts production soon. And I do think that saying that was pretty necessary, because by the time that season 2 comes out next year in 2026, it may have been 3 whole years since the airing of season 1, which is just way too much time between seasons, especially seasons of such short episode counts. And mate, if you are not something like Severance, then that sort of time gap can be very difficult to survive. So announcing that season 2 is coming soon and that season 3 will be shortly after, I guess that's the implication, is a good move in my opinion, because I do worry a lot about the continuation of One Piece live action. A lot of you are going to think I'm a bit ridiculous for that because of all the numbers that Netflix released, where it was the most watched show during the second half of 2023, but season 1 was an unusual phenomenon. It did something pretty incredible in that it broke into the mainstream, because what really made it newsworthy was that it was a live action anime TV series that didn't completely and embarrassingly fall flat on its face. But season 2 won't have that cultural boost because you can only break that live action curse once. And also, where season 1 had the vast majority of the global fan base tuning in out of sheer curiosity, all of that audience isn't necessarily coming back. Because the general opinion, as far as I've observed through thousands of comments and channel polls, tends to be that yeah, it was good, but the bar was set pretty low. But with that said, almost everything in this trailer looks to be a distinct improvement over season 1, so visually, I think we're on the right track, and you let me know what you think in the comments below. And thank you so much again to Fume for sponsoring this video, and definitely check them out through the link in the description.